I've noticed a growing trend among CSGO fans of when they complain about map balance and when they talk about what they don't like about a certain map. So an obvious case recently was nuke was taken out and trains been added into the active duty map pool. The way they'll frame the debate and the perspective they give is, quite frankly, it's alien to me, and it's actually, I feel it's like a little bit disrespectful. It's actually quite annoying the way it's outlined, as though this is makes sense and this is the way things should be. So when I talk about the beauty of map balance, because I think there is beauty in it, I think if it's set up properly, it emphasizes all these different aspects of the game and sets in place a certain context of what's happening that you can really appreciate, and you can see the difficulty of it, knowing reference points of how a map should play and what the dynamic of a map is. When we talk about all these qualities, I want to first talk about what map balance is not. Map balance does not mean individual maps always being 8-7 halves, whether that's 8 terrorist rounds or 7 CT rounds. That does not mean a map is balanced. That just means that terrorists tend to win slightly less than CT. CT only tends to win slightly less than terrorist. That doesn't say anything about balance. The only balance there is the numbers are balanced. But what does that mean about balance? Why would the dynamic be so that one team is not in any way favored? What balance there is not taken as a given just because it's 8-7. And likewise, that uniformity of these 8-7 halves across the map pool is the end goal. That's balance. That's ultimately where we're headed. Does not also mean that all maps should have the potential for strong terrorist play. That is not taken within the concept of map balance. It definitely also does not mean that pro teams, when playing pro games, should not be wrecking the CT side with regularity. That is not taken for granted whatsoever. Now, when we talk about balancing individual maps here, first of all, we have to ask at what level. There's a big problem for you right there. Because at the normal matchmaking level, a map might be balanced. A map might have a lot of play on the terrorist side. I'm thinking, for example, of Mirage. You can see many games if you go into matchmaking where your team will have chances to get these T rounds and they'll get lots of plants. But you go watch Fnatic, the best Mirage team in the world, play, and they're going to lock that CT side down. There's not even going to be many plants in the B side. They're going to utterly wreck it and make it look so imbalanced and so broken. So first of all, what level are we talking about at? When I talk about balance, I'm only really going to talk about the pro level, because that's the level I care about. Yeah, I play the game sometimes, but I only care really about esports and CS at the highest level, when the world-class teams. I want to know when Envy plays against NiP and they play on Inferno, I want to know the balance there in terms of, is it right? Is it the right setup? Now, as a result, I think it's a problem when you start talking about individual map balance if you don't look at the larger scale picture of the map pool at the pro scene. So on the pro level, not just talking about active duty, but the pro level of what all the pro teams are playing, when we look at map balance here, we have to look at it as a holistic approach. So an ideal world, when you have this map pool, let's say you have 7 maps, would be, in an ideal world, you'd have 3 maps that were heavily CT-sided, you'd have 3 maps that were heavily T-sided, and you'd have one final map that was in the middle. That was an 8-7, 9-6 sort of map, where there was more play to it. And so as a result, neither side of play would be actually imbalanced, would have this advantage over the whole map pool. So first of all, that means that teams that are awesome CT teams, but not that great on T-side and execution, doesn't matter. You still have a place to win and to show that quality, and we can appreciate it. Teams that are amazing on T-side, teams that are able to get an incredible amount of rounds but can't get that many CT rounds, great, we can enjoy your play too. You can have a chance in these series. And then in the middle, we've got a map that's a bit of both, that both teams can maybe agree to play on. And amazing teams on both sides are going to get extra advantage there. It's going to work to the benefit of the whole scene, and every type of team is going to work. So, for example, great CT teams that tend to have problems on the T side sometimes. Well, think of TSM, Dignitas as they were formerly called. Awesome CT sides, 11, 12 rounds, lockdown CT sides. Not so great on T sides. Now, if the world's only CT-sided maps, I'd agree. If it was 7 out of 7 maps are all super CT-sided, yes, now there's a problem, because this TSM team is going to get an unnatural advantage, and their strengths are going to be unnaturally emphasized, and their overall weaknesses are going to be less emphasized. That's true. Now then, in a world where a team is really good at T sides, but they're having problems on CT sides, think of the current Titan with Kenny S. Just look at that Starladder tournament. Again and again, getting more than the map bias's worth of T rounds, many more in some cases, but not closing it out on CT side, having trouble on CT side. Now, in a world where there's no T-sided maps, Now they're going to have some problems there, or it's going to be more difficult for them then, as we already see to some extent. But in a world where there were only T-sided maps, they were incredibly, now they'd look way better than they perhaps should, and there wouldn't be a balance between all the teams and the maps and the styles of play. But in an ideal world where there was 3 of each, now we'd have teams like TSM and Titan. And what's interesting is the way they would pick ban, in my favourite pick ban, where you ban one, then you pick one, you ban one, then you pick one, then last is the remaining map. In that world, with this map pool, we'd get an awesome series between those two teams. Because what would happen is, TSM would come along, they'd ban out one of the T-sided maps, and they'd pick one of the CT-sided maps, okay? So we've got 5 maps left. Now Titan would come along, they'd ban out one of the CT-sided maps, they'd pick one of the T-sided maps. So we've got a T and a CT-sided map at the moment, right? For map 1 and map 2. So we've got a good chance, if they both play to the max of their level and the matchup's good, that we can go to a 3rd map now. What's the 3rd map going to be within this world, kids? Remember, we've banned out one of the CT-sided and picked one of the CT-sided. We've banned out one of the T-sided and picked one of the T-sided. Overall, of the 4 between them, there's 1 map left, remember? It's the one in the middle. It's the 8-7, 9-6 sort of one where there's more play. So now we're going to have a series between these two teams where we can really get to see who can play at each other's strengths, who can play at each other's weaknesses, and then one in the middle to sort of make it more of a decider and add a suspect. What a great world that would be, eh? It existed. This was 1.6 in the latter days up until it was around the summer of 2011. That's when it was changed. Because around the summer of 2011, much like CSGO fans experienced in late 2013, the game developer in CSGO came along and inserted these 2 maps into the pool. 2014, rather. Let me think, actually. Yeah, it was 2014 that they put them in. It was Overpass and Cobblestone. Not right at the end. It was sort of around the summer. Now, in 1.6, it was the organizations. It was DreamHack, ESL. They all got together and decided, right, we're going to put in Mirage, at the time a new map, but an update of Strike. And they put in a map called Forge, which essentially was Cobblestone. Same exact thing happened. But before that, we had 5 maps in CS 1.6. And these maps broke down like this. Train and Nuke, incredibly CT-sided. Dust 2 and Tuscan, incredibly T-sided. Inferno, bang in the middle, 8-7. Depends purely what type of team you are as to where your strength is. Now, you'll notice how I described that there, because the way I described Inferno there is exactly the key to this discussion. It's that I didn't say, oh, it's an even map, and therefore it'll be 8-7 halves every single time. I said it's an even map, and it depends which side your strengths are on. So awesome Inferno teams on T-side could get out 9 rounds T-side. But but an okay pro-level team at Inferno would struggle to get 5 or 6 even. Now an awesome CT team on Inferno could get 10 rounds, 9 rounds. But quite a poor CT team might only end up about 6 or 7. Maybe 8 would be their limit. So it's about the style of play. Now, that's on that one particular map because we need a map pool that has that quality within it. That's great in itself. But take that same concept and transpose it to the other maps, which we know the biases of, and you're going to see the same thing again. Just because Nuke's CT-sided does not mean that if you took Titan and put them on Nuke versus, let's take a very good T-side team, so NIP is a great example, Virtus Pro maybe, does not mean that Titan automatically, they'll get 12 rounds. You don't. Titan might only get 9, and then they'll struggle, because then they'll have to go crazy on that T side. And then, if a team like NIP, who's also strong on the CT side, maybe not, more so than Titan, definitely, then they're going to get the edge and they're going to win. The context is set there. That's an example with the map pool of 1.6 of how it promotes and celebrates all styles. It's not just one style. It's not just one or the other. With Nuke and Train, what you got to see in this game was the beauty of counter-terrorist play. You know how there's a natural chauvinism in CS to terrorist play. We all know terrorist play because we know the strategies there and that you're working together and it's how you attack the site and your timing and where the flashes come in, and then individual plays within that framework of knowing what they're trying to do, going along on these rails, but then having plays they can make and then adapting to the retake of the CTs. We can all see the beauty of that. We all understand that. But why don't people understand the beauty of the CT side? Like I said, it's not that all these other teams, it's just standard that everyone dominates the CT side. It's not the case at all. When you're on CT side, now you have to put a bit of defense to play against this attack where likely they'll have better numbers than you if they pick correctly. You have to rotate in and retake and have communication. These are different qualities to some degree than we're having in the terrorist side, because a lot of that can be set beforehand and then some of it's chaotic. The CT, it's about the communication, the synergy openly where you've decided you're going to do this, and the intuitive synergy of like, oh, as he's looking there, I have to look here. I can't just look there at both times because then he might come out here. So I have to just trust that my teammate's got this and understand from play where he'll look and where I should look. And when this works out, it's beautiful. Just think of some of those amazing Nip retakes they used to have on Inferno where they'd come and retake the B site. It was utterly incredible stuff. Their communication, their intuitive team play was off the charts. It was really impressive stuff. Think about the way Fnatic plays their CT side on Inferno now. Not only do they lock the site down, but they're locking down Inferno, a map that's supposed to have more T-side rounds in the original balance of the map, entirely because they understand the dynamics so well that they read both what their strengths are at the moment and the enemy's attacks to be gambling that rotator between the two sites. So either he's in B and they have the full lockdown 2-man there, or they have him in A and they have 4 people and it's impossible to break the site. That's what's beautiful about it. You see the elegance of what they can do that even other great CT teams, like TSM was a great CT team on Inferno, even they couldn't get to this level. So yes, we know the baseline's there in the late meta of 2014. You're supposed to get 10 rounds, but the difference was Fnatic could push that and they could get the 12 consistently, or they could get 13 in a game. They could really show you, and because you understand the lockdown, the concept was that people are supposed to lock it down. When they go even above and beyond that, you know that this is something exceptional. This wasn't just anything. As a result, a great example recently of people complaining about map imbalance, and one thing they didn't like, was this game between TSM and NIP at Star Ladder Star Series Season 12 LAN Finals, just last week. And it was the third place game. It was the lower bracket final. And what happened in this game was you had this nuke game where NIP won the first 3 rounds on Terrorist, then TSM won all 12 rounds CT. Swapped over, NIP just won 13 rounds as CT. TSM never got around. NIP won the game. So you look at this map and people look and they post sarcastic things like, oh, I'm glad that nuke's gone, it's boring, look at that. No. What is the context of that, remember? These are the 2 best teams in the world at nuke. Now, nuke is naturally favouring the CT side, giving the CT side, emphasising the CT defensive strengths. So what we're seeing here is a battle of the 2 best teams at the CT side. You should expect that the CT rounds will be won. Now then, the interesting thing there is NIP won those first 3 rounds. What if NIP had broken that first gun round? What if they'd have gotten that one with an incredible T-side strategy? First of all, we'd know, wow, that's amazing. We know how good TSM are once they get guns, as we later saw. Secondly, if they get 4 rounds on T-side, now we have that whole context of, whoa, if they even get 1 or 2 more, this game could be over already. They could be in a really good position to win. And TSM's aware of that. The pressure's on them. Likewise, when TSM gets their 12 rounds, whew, they just saved it. Now then they go to T-side. Right, well, we know they're going to have to execute because NIP's fucking amazing on CT. So even though they've got 12 rounds, it's not like the game's over, like, oh, well, we'll get to 4 somehow, we'll grind it out. No, it's going to be very hard to grind on nuke. Especially, here's the context, because they're playing one of the world's best teams on nuke. This is an example of where it should be super CT-sided because of the nature of the map and the matchup. That's the key thing. If you put TSM against some bad train team, so I'll pick one out. Envious is usually a bad nuke team. Envious hasn't been particularly good on nuke. Na'Vi particularly were very weak on nuke when I've seen them play it. Put TSM against Na'Vi and TSM will have that lockdown CT half, but you know what? They'll probably get 6 or 7 T rounds as well. It'll be easy for them. If you understand this context, that game should have been a lockdown game, but that's what you were supposed to enjoy. That was the mastery to enjoy. It's a bit like in sports. People have this chauvinism towards the flashy, the highlight plays, scoring lots of goals. But when you see 2 great defensive teams play, if you understand the context of the defense and what's amazing about what they're doing, shutting someone down, there's a beauty in that. There's something exceptional about that. One of the great examples of this, was one of the great USC fighters, was a guy called Georges St. Pierre. And actually, this guy did have all the skills. Earlier in his career, when he's fighting these 3-round fights and he was an up-and-comer, he used to have these highlight amazing fights. He'd do these crazy moves and you'd be like, wow, what a fucking exceptional player. What an athlete. But when he got to be a pro at the top level, and he was the champion, he was fighting these 5-round battles and he was fighting all different types of fighter, kickboxer, wrestler, jiu-jitsu guy, dangerous striker. When he was fighting all these different people, his whole game became around control, using my strengths to neutralize your strengths so that you don't have any strengths anymore and I just control you. I win the fight by points. I win it by shutting you down. Now, if you watch the fights alone and you didn't know about the UFC, you might say, this is boring. Like, this sport needs to be fixed and change some things up and, you know, take away this rule where you can just sit on him like that and he gets points for takedowns. You'd say all this stuff, but that's because you don't realize the context. That guy he's fighting against everyone else in that other guy's career, that guy's strengths have been magnified. He's been knocking people the fuck out. He's been choking them out. He's been getting them in holds. He's been taking people down like we fought John Fixer Grinder. The other guy's been taking people down and holding them down and getting points like that. And GSP's taken all of these different strengths and he's neutralized it all using his natural strengths. Now, if you take away all these rules and you add in all these rules and fuck up his whole style, yeah, you'll reduce it and he won't be able to do it as much. But the beauty of it is that these people can do that against other people, but they can't do it against him because these are his strengths, those are their strengths, these are how they match up. That's what happens if you say we can't have any maps like Nuke or like Old Train. You take away that aspect of Counter-Strike, which is its own beauty, the CT play, the synergy, the setups that you use, how you adapt the setups between rounds, the communication, the intuitive team play off each other, neutralizing great terrorist teams with amazing CT play. Don't get rid of that. In the same way you don't want to get rid of the great T play either. I'd love it if there were more maps with great team play. In the same way that you shouldn't complain now about TSM versus NIP on Nuke, you also shouldn't complain in the past about when LDLC and Fnatic were wrecking every CT side on Inferno in late 2014 when they made a new meta of dominating CT side. Because the difference is, then when teams like NIP could come along and get a bunch of rounds on T side, you were like, wow, holy fuck, this is amazing. They're beating LDLC on Inferno. We know what monsters LDLC are. The context is even better because of this inherent map bias that can exist, but you can balance it a different way with an overall approach. Because it's the dynamic of CS that some rounds are meant to emphasize CT play, small chokes that the Colt can spray into very easily, that they can hold from a different angle with a silencer so the terrorist doesn't know where he's coming in. It's built into the play within Counter-Strike. And what does the terrorist have? Well, on maps that are more open and that there's more entrances into, now his AK just rips apart guys there when the map's more open. Places where there's nowhere to hide, his gun does more damage long range and can just headshot in one shot immediately. So he doesn't know where the enemy is, but if he locks on him and gets one bullet, now he kills him and he enters the whole site, breaks it open. Now it's about how can the CTs retake when we know this is more of a T-side map. These whole dynamics should exist if you balance the map pool properly. And it won't be about the map. It'll no longer be about the map. It'll now be about the teams. Because there were great teams in 1.6 who on a map that was super imbalanced for CT, like 12 rounds default, like Train. Well, now you get a team like Fnatic 2009 who could have halves where they would get 7 rounds and just run them straight off you on T side. Or Na'Vi who could get 8 rounds on T side, 7 rounds on T side, and then get their 11 to 12 on CT and be unbeatable on Train. That was their greatest ever map. This is the context that we set up and the beauty and the history of the map. Knowing the historical context of when these teams met last and what they're going to adapt now, we need to have the baseline to set that. If every map was just some nightmare world of 8-7s, it would actually ruin all these aspects and it would emphasize unfairly other aspects of the game. If we want competitive integrity, we can't just do things because certain casual fans who don't know these aspects and can't appreciate them don't enjoy it. We have to have... The game exists because it's a great game, okay? That's what has to be the core principle. And then because it's a great game, we hope people are going to come and watch it because it's great. We can't go, right, well, there's a bunch of people over here who sort of would watch it if it was different. Oh, yeah, what should we change to make it so that you'll like the game? Oh, well, I don't really like it when it's, like, boring. There's, like, CT's just winning all the rounds on Nuke. Like, oh, okay, sir, yeah, what shall I change to fix that for you? The game has to have its own competitive integrity and play to its own dynamics that are what made Counter-Strike as a franchise an amazing game, which has some of these concepts of CT play and balancing out the T play and the weapons having their own natural balance of the mobility versus the spraying versus the headshots. All these qualities have naturally existed in an equilibrium, a dynamic that they're reached if you give the teams and the map pool enough chance to breathe. In the same sense, I'll give you an analogy of what I hate as a concept. When Quake, the first one, came out, it was a game where if you got in control in duel 1v1, you could really dominate your opponent. So what happened was people would complain and they'd say this is bullshit because like the best player in the world can play the second best player and he dominates him like 20-2 or something because he gets in control, he dominates and keeps that guy down, even though it's the second best player in the world. Now, the guy who programmed Quake himself, John Carmack, this genius coder, himself thought the same way because he wasn't into super esports. He wasn't a hardcore multiplayer game guy. He looked at it and he said, you know what, I don't like that. I want it to be like a basketball game, where no matter what happens in the game, in the last 3 or 4 minutes, a team can always do a crazy comeback. They can always get back into it. It's always exciting for the TV crowds. Now, that's terrible for a competitive integrity. Think about that. If most of the game doesn't matter, that's why I complain so much about Tech 9 and CZ. Because when you win these pistol rounds, you're supposed to be rewarded for that. When you have full guns, you're supposed to have a natural advantage. Well, if we're going to go with this balance idea, no, every pistol should be super strong. In fact, if you want to go with just pleasing plebs and crowds and getting lots of people and go, wow, every round's exciting, then make it, as it almost is the case now, where every single round, no matter the money that each team has, they can buy some sort of gun where there's a decent chance they can get kills and win the round with it. Now, personally, that would be a nightmare to me. It would take away almost everything that's great about the competitive Counter-Strike franchise, but it would make all the rounds in these people's minds exciting. Now, obviously, it doesn't make it exciting, because in the same sense that actually reduces the impact of each round, because even if you lose this one, you buy up Tech 9s and you might win the next one. In the same sense as that's the case, if we don't have these biases to the maps, then I win 2 rounds here, okay, whatever, you win 3 rounds back, but there's no logic to it. It's not like, oh, I won 2 rounds here, and because we know that I'm only supposed to get to 4 typically at the pro scene on this map, I'm already at 3 and we're only 6 rounds in. I'm way ahead of pace. You know the context that, hey, that CT team better really lock it down now, or they're in trouble and they're under the hammer in terms of when they get to their side on T side. Likewise, if they're on CT side and they're up 14 rounds and you're only supposed to get 10 9 or 10, well, they're way ahead of the game. And how will the opponent have to face his perfect CT round if he wants to really win this game? The context, the beauty, the history, the historical context of this is the perspective we want to cultivate. Just because someone doesn't understand it now, you don't have to, it's not like you're ignorant and you can never understand it, but try to think about things in these ways. Look at games and ask who we're playing here. Is this a great team? Is it just that the map's biased, or is that a team that can emphasize that bias? Is that a style of play that I can actually celebrate? Yeah, there's no bombs getting down. Well, it's pretty incredible if you can stop a team like NIP planting bombs in general. They're a fucking amazing T-side team. They always find a way in. They've got the set roles, even historically, in terms of the entry fraggers, the guys who come last. They've got all these tools, and you can shut them down. You better be an exceptional team. That's not the map that shut NIP down there. That's TSM that shut that NIP down there. So this is the context I want people to kind of try and understand. Now then, speaking of this fantasy world where it's 8-7 halves, if you want to play some fantasy Counter-Strike, see that marketing there, then you could go over to Vulcan.com, who is sponsoring this podcast, and sign up with the code Thorin with 3 O's, THOOORIN, at Vulcan.com, VULCUN.com, and they will match your initial deposit by 100% up to $1,000, and you'll see all the different play days there for CSGO, different tournaments. You can also play League of Legends there, Fantasy League of Legends, thanks to Vulcan.